Thank you, Beth. We are here with Ellie for the role of Community and Wellbeing Officer. But before we get into the interview, let's see what that role really means.
Community and Wellbeing Officer represents students on issues affecting their well-being, such as health, finance, accommodation and security, as well as wider community issues. The Community and Wellbeing Officer is key to ensuring that students from a range of backgrounds and minority groups are represented within the university.
And Ellie joins me now. Thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you for having me.
So for people who don't know, if you just want to sum up very quickly who you are, what your experience is and why you're running for this role.
So I'm a third year theatre student. I have had a lot of experience of a lot of the different systems at uni. So I've taken a leave of absence. I am a disabled student. I'm also a queer woman. So I'm like, there's a few boxes that I tick in terms of representation. That's always fun. But yeah, I've had a lot of experience of mental health systems. I've helped out on Steph's campaign for the past 2 years. So I understand the running. I understand how it works. And it's something I'm really passionate about.
And I want to hone in on one of those first, which is leave of absence. It's something we've seen a lot of discussion about this year in particular. What would you identify as the flaws in that system? How can students be better supported? And what can you do as a USU SAB to make sure those things are changed?
So one of the biggest flaws with the leave of absence system is that when you have this leave of absence, there is it's almost like a cut-off from university. And then when you go back in, there is not really the support. So you need support and you need to integrate back into slowly. So when I first joined, they were like, right, off you go. Here's a new year group. Have fun. It'll be fine. It was very stressful. So we have, the USU, they've introduced with the £500,000. So they're having student minds and they're having faculty, not faculty rep, but departmental reps with the student mind thing. So that'll be really helpful, but encouraging more support and making it more of a network, because going through a leave of absence is such a big decision to make. You're effectively having to put a pause on a lot of different things. And
in terms of that leave of absence process, do you think more should be done in the past to push students to support? What would you do beyond the support that's already been announced to push to improve that process?
I think having a lot more information about it is one of the key things. So when I took it, there was no information. It was just you take a leave of absence, and then all of a sudden I didn't know that I would have less financial support from SFE the next year, which was really, really difficult. I didn't know how I was meant to manage coming back into a new year group, and it's all sorts of things like that. So maybe even something is, I know it's it sounds very old school, but things like a buddy system. So when you first join a new year group, it can be the most stressful, anxious thing. You don't know anyone. All these kids, we're all students, all these students have grown up together and they're in this year, and you've had to leave all your friends and you've rejoined someone else, and it's quite difficult. So that sort of system, and also academic support, because it's such a big, you take a break from doing anything academic and then they expect you to be able to write at the same level.
Yeah. And you talk a lot about academic support and sort of the stress more generally that sometimes students face. What do you see as something that USU or you in your role should be doing to improve that for students? What can you do?
So in terms of stress, it's something that is a part of everyday life, and there is different levels of stress. There is a healthy amount of stress, but a lot of students suffer and don't necessarily realise that the amount of stress that they feel isn't healthy, and that can impact things like how well you're eating, sleeping, even basic everyday tasks. They go out the window when you're really stressed. So things like introducing more education on stress, so seeing how people can recognise the symptoms and little steps into self-care and self-worth. So working with student minds to educate new students coming in, and as well as working with the colleges to make sure everyone is aware that there is this big network that can help, and introducing with the new reps coming in, the new money, that's really going to hopefully help.
And you mentioned working with the colleges there, and one of the things that's been sort of noticed in campus in the past few days is this letter that college chairs sent to you. So it's not necessarily directly affecting community and wellbeing, but how can you, in your future role, should you get it, help to rebuild that relationship with college chairs, presidents and committees?
Yeah, I think that's something that's really important. that letter, I read it and I like saved it because I was like, that's something really important. And it did, like, when I was reading it, I was like, yeah, if people are unhappy, they're not going to come and talk to the uni. And that does affect the community because there is discourse between college community and the student union that's meant to be representing them. So I want to make more of an open dialogue and have like some really honest chats, because I know there's lots of disagreement. For example, a lot of people dislike York parties, and that's a big thing. Like, lots of people feeling like the college system the college, the way that's structured, and the student union, there's no like correlation, things like that. And I think people need to have the conversation so we can sit down and be like, where have we gone wrong in representing you?
And you have said that colleges are sort of a lower priority than USU societies, than Bucks teams, than rag and volunteering organisations, because they're not directly part of USU. Do you think colleges should be a higher priority for people in USU?
I think they should do, because they're a high priority for students, especially when you first come to university. You're a lot of people, you live in that college that you are a member of, and that's a big part of your community, and that's a big part of your well-being. These are the people you make friends with in your first year. So I think it needs to be more of a priority than it is. I know it's quite difficult because it doesn't necessarily fall under what USU represents. However, if it's important to the students, it's got to be important to the union.
And the current officer in the role, Steph, as Community and Wellbeing, you spoke about her at the beginning. She's taken on these sort of campaigns. It's bust this, it's cut the rent, or the rent rant.
Yeah.
What are your campaigns for next year? What are your big things that you want to say, I want to win on this?
So obviously I want to continue with bust this, and I want to continue with rent rant, because they're really important for everyone. However, I also want to talk, I want to also start a campaign about stress, because I think that's such a common thing. So with the hashtag Let's Talk York, having online campaigning. I'd also, one of my main things is accessibility at York. So York, quite a lot of the paths are very steep. If you're graduating and you're in Central Hall, like if you have a mobility issue, you can't sit with your friends. Things like that are really, really difficult. Also with the absence procedure, I want to reform that, and I want to make changes so people feel more comfortable with what they need to do.
And you talk about your experience sort of seeing how this role is done, seeing what's happened. What would you have done differently? What are the things where you pick out and think, if I was doing that, I'd change that a bit, or I'd go about that a different way?
So I think one of them is transparency. Obviously there is, this has been an issue for a while with USU, and it's improved a lot more from, say, the 2 years ago, so with James Durkin's year, when he was president. I think it's improved a lot. But in terms of the student union, sometimes people are taking on roles that they didn't necessarily expect to, or there's things in their manifestos that they can't promise. So I think in that sense, I guess going through what I did and what I would have done is go through my manifesto and be like, right, what are the really important things that I want to do? And I've made sure that I've put in things that I know I can, or I can try to make a difference on.
And then as we come into the final couple of minutes on this interview, obviously it's difficult when you're running against one person, I think. And what's the thing that sort of makes you special, makes you the person that people should go online and put their first preference next to?
I have had a lot of experience, like personally, like I've taken the leave of absence, I've gone through open doors, I've gone through all these systems, and I know how rough it is. Like, I am very open that I have anxiety and depression, and that it affects me and my learning, and I want to change that. So everyone else who feels like they're at a disadvantage in their learning, they feel supported in ways that I necessarily wasn't when I was a student, and I don't want other people to feel how I felt.
And again, we've spoken about priorities, but if you could only get one or two things done from your manifesto, if there was sort of things you had to put as priorities, you know, it's often difficult to get things done in a UC SAB role. What are the things you think, this is my priority, this is the one thing that I want to get out of this year?
I want stress support to be something throughout the academic year, because people are stressed all the time. You constantly have deadlines. It's not just about exams. Student life is stressful. There's lots of different issues, for example, finance and things like that.
Do you think that hasn't been there in the past? Has there not been enough support throughout the year? Has it been mainly focused on exams?
Yeah, there's like a lot of, so for example, Keep Your Cool, that's predominantly runs in exam weeks. And I'm not saying it's feasible to have people standing at, in the kitchen at Alcuin and like providing food all through the year, but there needs to be more discussion, more education and more support.
Yeah, and finally, so we've got a few sentences. What's your pitch? You should vote for me because...
Okay, so you should vote for me because I care deeply about students and I care deeply about everyone's well-being and the community. I've been through it. I've been on college committees. I've done a lot and I know what needs to change. So vote for me if you think Elle can, and I will, and Elle would. That's my hashtag. That was really badly explained.
Well, thank you anyway, Ellie, and thank you for being here. We're going to take a little break with Memories from Maroon 5.
Very nice.